Faith Church, hope you're well. It's Wednesday, October the 13th. If you have been reading through Deuteronomy with us, I hope you have. There's some challenging parts in there, and some of these last chapters, particularly some of the law that God's people are asked to follow seems quite harsh. There is this refrain that comes in that all this sin and evil of the land must be purged from among you, and so those who stray are sometimes even executed. And there's no way around this. These are difficult passages to reckon with in the Old Testament. Instead of focusing on those today, I want to focus some on what comes up in Deuteronomy 24, which is today's reading, and it's a beautiful. There's some beautiful passages woven in there, particularly showing the heart that God has for the poor among us. And I couldn't help think of this, particularly in light of what we talked about Sunday, with us being salt and light in the world that is full of decay and darkness. Just a couple examples. If you haven't read this chapter, I would encourage you to do so. Part of the law is about collateral, and the text says that basically, when you make a loan to somebody and they give you collateral, if the person gives you their coat as collateral, which in those days people didn't have a lot of possessions, the coat may have been the most valuable thing they owned, take the collateral, but then every night give it back to the person who loaned it to you so they have something to keep them warm. In the morning they can give it back to you. Just such a tender concern for someone who has very little. Later on in the text, it commands, you shall not withhold the wages of the poor and needy laborers in your fields. In other words, you need to pay them at the end of the day, right at sundown, before sundown, pay them their wages so that they can have money to get food, because this is subsistence living. They lived on what they made that day, and so you couldn't just wait for a 2-week pay period. People would starve, so give them their wages. They need them tonight. Then a beautiful passage toward the end of the chapter where it talks about those who would go out into the harvest fields and would reap from the wheat or the grain, or pick grapes off of the vine. It says, go through once and shake the branches or reap, but then whatever fruit doesn't fall off on the first go through, let it be, so that the alien or the stranger or the refugee or the person the impoverished among you can come through the fields and have enough to eat. Just woven through there, this beautiful remembrance of those who are poor. A couple reflections on that. One, and it comes in a couple, all through Deuteronomy, read this sort of thing. Do this. So just remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. It's a reminder that all of us are just a heartbeat away from being in desperate need ourselves. And so as we care for those who are in need, it humbles us to remember that there's really not that much difference between us and them. Secondly, as a friend of mine reminded me today, that poverty comes in many forms. Some people with great material wealth are spiritually or emotionally, relationally impoverished. Like some of you, I've traveled to parts of the world that are very materially poor, but are rich in community and rich in joy in ways that maybe we in America are not. And so we all experience some level of poverty in some way, but God has a specific heart for those who are materially poor. And I just love this chapter, how it gets us to think, even in your common activities of loaning and borrowing, of collecting your harvest, of these sorts of things, that we would be mindful of those among us who have less than we do, and certainly less than they need. If you read the psalm today, I think it's Psalm 106. It's another psalm about just remembering what God has done for you. The more we remember, the more humble we are, the more willing we are to care for those around us who are in a place we used to be, and a place where we may one day be again. So really beautiful things in the midst of Deuteronomy. Hope you're well today, wherever you are. As always, my prayer is that you would sense the love of God your Father, the grace of Christ his Son, and the fellowship, the presence of the Spirit with you. Peace.